We're going to put in a little retaining wall, just 200mm high.
I'm setting this first piece just roughly in place. I want the dirt to be able to support the timber we're going to insert in it. I finished the cut, double check I got the angle right. This completes the inside edge if we mix these two ingredients together, steel mesh.
Close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
So we've completed installing our treated pine for this formwork. It's going to contain the stone wall that matches our stone wall over here. So we're ready to pour our foundation here, but before we get to that, we're going to use this piece of timber to do a little retaining wall around this tree that we had to build this whole terrace around. We're going to put in a little retaining wall, just 200mm high. We always design this area here to incorporate this tree, so a pathway goes around it. It's nice working with existing plants, so when our hardscape's finished, it already has established trees or plants in place, which really makes it look nice. And then we'll be putting a temporary beam along here so we can bring in all the gravel to match our gravel pathway and the patio area above this retaining wall. And that's kind of the plan for today.
I wanted to give you a preview of what it's going to look like when we finish the perimeter around this tree and add our golden path gravel to the rest of this platform. I'm using a scrap piece of timber the same dimensions as the treated pine to determine the length of the first piece we're going to cut and put in place. After checking my level and angle of how this piece is going to wrap around the tree, I take a measurement and go and cut a piece on my saw. I have limited space to work in this area, so in this case I've set my saw up on the lower terrace area to keep it out of the way. My saw can't cut all the way through these 200mm sleepers, so we flip them round to make the cut all the way through the piece. I'm setting this first piece just roughly in place and double checking it with our levels and tape measure to make sure we've got the right width. I'm satisfied with the length of this piece, so I'm just squaring it off against the wall to get it in a more exact position so we can calculate the other pieces that are going to wrap around this tree. I'm using my spirit level to visualize how this timber is going to wrap around the tree so we can get a starting point and know where to excavate the dirt to be able to fit the timber in. I'm excavating this trench gently and carefully. There's a lot of tree roots that belong to this tree. We don't want to damage them. Using my small mattock helps me establish the line of this trench, and then I use the larger mattock to be able to remove more dirt. By using a combination of tools, I can get this trench dug effectively. I don't want it to be too wide or too deep. I want the dirt to be able to support the timber we're going to insert in it. This purpose-designed trenching shovel is narrower than a normal shovel and really effective for achieving this. I'm using a scrap piece of timber in my level to check that this trench is deep enough. With the primary excavation complete, I can cut a piece of timber to fit in this place. But first I'm going to have to establish an angle I'm going to cut it at, as this timber is going to meet the bricks on a certain angle. I just transpose this angle onto the adjustment of my circular saw to be able to cut it at the same angle. Once I've set my timber up in a good spot, I mark my timber with my square and pencil and then make the cut. With the saw set to about a 30-degree angle, the saw's not deep enough to cut all the way through the 75mm thick sleeper material. I finish the cut with my handsaw. I'm returning the timber to its position so I can double check I got the angle right and also calculate the next cut as we wrap it around this tree. I'm setting my angle so I can cut this piece to create a slight arc in our pathway. The timber needs to be cut down to reduce its thickness so we can stay clear of some of these tree roots. After a final rough assembly in place, I then assemble the whole system together.
It had summer night, sitting back in the light, trying to find the words to describe something that I can't find. Maybe it's time to see the truth. I haven't fallen far from you.
Once I know everything's going to fit together properly, I often assemble these garden edges upside down. It's just easier to assemble it on top of a couple of timbers to create a flat surface.
Before this time, can you say to me, can you see and can you feel? Can you show me why you believe in something I can't see?
This completes the inside edge for our golden path. Now we're going to work on the outside edge. I'm using an old piece of retaining wall to create this temporary pathway edge. We're going to be doing a lot of construction on this particular terrace, but we just want something temporarily in place to get the pathway roughly at the right height. After scraping out a very shallow trench to fit this piece of timber in, we double check with our level to make sure we're getting to the right height. I scrape some of the gravel back in around the edges just to lock it in as a backfill. Then we fix it in with some stakes. After locking the stakes off with some screws, we move on to excavating a trench for the piece that joins us to the existing golden path.
Another hot summer night, sitting back in the light, trying to find the words to describe.
This piece finishes all the edging we're going to need for this pathway for the moment. Now that the height of the path has been established with these timber edges, a little more dirt and gravel has to be excavated from this pathway. We've got to make enough room for our 50mm of gravel we're going to be laying on top. This golden path gravel is a continuation of the upper terrace project we covered in a previous series. It's made up of 50% packing sand and 50% of a product called golden path, which is a yellow pebbly mixture. By raking it out back and forth, we mix these two ingredients together to come up with our formula. I'm compacting this part down with my feet just so it's easier for the wheelbarrow to get over it to dump more gravel. Although this is quite a laborious process, it's very satisfying for me, as the previous part of this project was creating the access ramp that allows me and my wheelbarrow to get these materials in. Before we created this access ramp, it was really difficult to get any kind of materials into this backyard.
Another hot summer night, sitting back in the light, trying to find the words to describe something I can't find. Maybe it's time to see the truth. I haven't fallen far from you. I'm so much closer than I was to you before this time.
The other part that makes putting this gravel on top so satisfying is this terrace didn't exist when we started. This terrace was created as a dumping ground from all the previous projects we've done in this yard. So it's taken many months to build the soil up to this flat area that now we're covering with gravel.
It had summer night, the black and light, trying to find the words to describe something I can't find. Maybe it's time to see the truth. I haven't fallen far from you. I'm so much closer than I was to you before this time.
With this new terrace covered in golden path gravel, we're ready to move on to the concrete foundation of the natural stone wall. This concrete foundation is going to need a gravel base underneath it. I'm adding about 30 mil of gravel. This is a key component in the engineering and the structure. The gravel allows water to pass underneath our concrete without creating erosion. This stops voids being formed underneath the concrete, which is what will make it sag or crack in the future. After getting a nice even spread of this gravel, we wash the whole thing down. By wetting down the gravel, it helps compact it and wash all the small particles down to the bottom, which is all going to help in the stability of this system. Adding heavy wood screws to this treated timber will help bind it to the concrete foundation and natural stone wall. Pre-drilling all the holes will help the timber stop splitting. I want a nice spread of these screws to add strength to the whole system. I'm also careful not to drill them too deep so they come out the other side of the timber. I'm using recycled wood screws. Because I build a lot of concrete timber forms, I recycle a lot of my screws when I pull the forms apart. But after they've been used a couple of times, they're not very effective anymore. So this is a great place to use them without having to throw them away.
Trying to find the words to describe something I can't find. Maybe it's time to see the truth. I haven't fallen far from you.
After taking my morning break and enjoying the beautiful scenery I have on this job site, we prepare the steel we're going to need for this foundation and also the dry stone wall. I'm using a combination of steel mesh and steel rod to add the reinforcement structure into this concrete system. Due to my lack of space on this job site, I've got all my steel mesh in the lower part of this yard next to the horse paddock. After measuring the size I'm going to need, I'm using bolt cutters to cut this mesh. It's a small enough gauge for these bolt cutters to cut through instead of using my grinder.
Trying to find the words to describe something I can't find.
We're going to need 2 pieces of the steel mesh, one for the concrete base and one for the back of our stone wall.
I'm so much closer than I was to you before this time.
After adding all the steel components to our form, we're now ready to pour concrete. Join me on the next episode as we pour the concrete for this dry stone wall foundation.
Can you see and can you feel?
And get started on the preparation of the staircase for this lower terrace.
Something I can't see. Maybe it's time to see the truth. I haven't fallen far from you.
Thanks for joining me this week in my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.